can see it as well. So we are recording. Okay, so welcome everyone. So you're at a UN side event at the UN Youth Forum, Education for Sustainable Development, the Role of Higher Education. And this is done in a partnership today with Sunway University, University College Dublin, and the SDG Academy, which is the education wing of the Sustainable Development Solutions Network. So we do have a partnership, and I will get to that. We do a online master's program in sustainable development together. But today that's not going to be our only focus, but I might take liberties and play a video of that just at the end of the talk. So the first thing just to say is, I know we're all attending this virtually, but this is actually a side event of a UN meeting where normally it would be in New York and we'd be in one of the side rooms. So hopefully we can get into that spirit. We'll just pretend we're in New York in this side room and at the UN Youth Forum. And it is great that in terms of just participatory democracy, let's call it, the fact that the UN opens up the HLPF, which is the High Level Political Forum. This is officially a subcommittee of the High Level Political Forum. And of course, it's co-organized with a major group of children and youth. And this is a great opportunity to discuss all the things that are going to be discussed in July at the High Level Political Forum will be discussed here. So it'd be great to go to participate fully in all the talks and meetings and side events and social events tomorrow and the next day. And obviously to meet everyone, but they do synthesize all the meetings, they take recordings, and UNDESA, the Department of Economic and Social Affairs, they do synthesize everything and put in get a ministerial decoration, or a decoration, I should say, from this event, which goes in as papers into the High Level Political Forum. So this is not a model UN, this is actual UN work, and I know everyone is taking it very seriously, okay? The panel, I'll ask Chandrika. So let's say we have a nice mix by age and gender and region and everything, but I'll let the adults go first in a sense. So Chandrika is going to talk. She's director of the SDG Academy. And we have Lise Collins from the UN Academic Impact. So that's our kind of official if you like, entry point for all things higher education to do with the SDGs in the UN. On the student panel, we'll have reps from secondary, high school, undergraduate and UCD who represent a few students, a local pathways fellow from SDSN, Michael OJ. We'll have postgraduates who are on this MSc in Sustainable Development from Sunway in Malaysia, and also Laura Ham, who will represent the postgrads here on this MSc in Sustainable Development in University College Dublin. So what are we going to talk about? Well, if you look at the document Transforming Our World, actually children and youth are not mentioned that much in the targets and the goals. In fact, children are only mentioned in 11 out of 169 targets, which could be viewed as disappointing. And then I think youth are mentioned another few times outside the goals and targets. But if you really want to get the vision statement of this agenda, you've got to look at the declaration section. And in the declaration section, paragraph 25, I think we really do get the essence of this mission 4.7, which is SDG 4 target 7, which is basically about inclusive and equitable quality education at all levels for all people at all stages of life. And this is quite important. Now, it actually doesn't mention sustainable development there, unfortunately, but that's what paragraph 25 says. And in terms of a youth agenda, we had the Irish ambassador with the Kenyan ambassador co-chair the SDGs. And paragraph 51 and 53 are very important, right? Because basically, this is an agenda for the next 15 years or 10 years now, a charter for people and planet. But children and young women and men are critical agents of change, right? So you can see that they're the ones mentioned in this agenda. And then very importantly, and this is why we're here today, is the future of humanity lies in the hand of the younger generation who will pass it on to future generations. And we've mapped a road to sustainable development. It will be for all of us to ensure that this journey is achieved, etc., and irreversible. But what that's calling for is an intergenerational dialogue. And this is very much a feature of SDSM. We have SDSN and SDSN Youth, but even university lecturers, that's our whole life. In a university, the whole life is talking to young people, talking with lecturers, and parting knowledge, creating knowledge, dispersing knowledge across the generations. And this is what universities are about. So hopefully this is really in the spirit of the UN Youth Forum, where people of all ages are getting together and to empower youth as much as possible, and future generation, current youth and the future generations as much as possible. Just to remind you what Target 4.7 is, and just to say, when people think of universities, they kind of go, well, they think of teaching or the degrees they offer. They might think of research they do, hopefully, but actually they're much more than that, because traditionally universities were set up in traditional pillars. So they train teachers, they train doctors and nurses and social workers and engineers and so on, right? So that's actually quite important if we're thinking about having an impact on the SDGs. We also work with partnerships, like we work with the government in state exams, in the curriculum of state exams. We work with the private sector with R&D and technologies. We do science policy interface with the governments. So what I'm trying to say is that universities can go what I call downstream, have a big influence on primary and secondary or elementary and high school education. How we can go upstream and have an influence on professions and how we interact with government and the corporate sector and the religious and other people. So we actually can be a very important, if you like, agent of change when it comes to sustainable development education, and not just at the third level, but at all levels. And I think this is what this seminar is a little bit about, to get that point across. The one place I think, and I'll stop now, is that I do think, obviously, we're going to talk about access. We're going to talk about, we're going to talk about sustainable development education at all levels. But the one thing that I think we miss is to try and have a nice continuum, that from what I call cradle to grave, that you're getting this nice continuum of same development education. Because I would get people at master's level or undergrad level, and they've never heard of anything up to that stage. And I'd go, why wasn't that in preschool? Why wasn't it at primary school, secondary school? Why is it not in the undergrad? Why is it not in the postgrad? Why is it not in the careers you're going into? Why is it not in the ethos of governments and all the government policies and public policies, etc.? And until we get that continuum right, I think we have a big problem with sustainable development education. So that's my little pieces just to set up today. I will send you on these resources, some wonderful resources and UN academic impact to have a look at, like the Millennium Fellows, for example, we sponsor in UCD, for example. SDG Academy has lovely resources, Mission 4.7, for example. Look at my website, what we do in UCD in terms of open entry to the undergrad courses, postgrad courses, volunteers overseas, etc. Jeffrey Cha Institute, and of course UN SDSN. So there's wonderful opportunities for young people across those resources. And we're going to hear more about them now. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to invite Chandrika first to say a few words on behalf. She's Vice President for Education in UN SDSN and Director of the SDG Academy. And most of us know her because obviously the SDG Academy courses are part of the assignments right across the undergrads and right across the postgrad. You have the floor, Chandrika.
Thank you, Paul. And good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining. Paul says I have 5 minutes. So what I'm going to try and do in those 5 minutes is address a couple of the core questions that Paul's raised today in terms of how do we really think about integrating sustainable development in our education system, and how well are we doing on that, and what are the things to think about. But before I do that, I want to give you a little bit of a sense of who we are and why we are speaking. The Academy, as Paul said, is the online education initiative of the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network. This here is our vision, a world where the SDGs are realized through the effort of young people like you around the world that have access to what you need, the tools that you need to really advance sustainable development around the world. And our particular mission in this vision of our world is to create and put together relevant educational content on the Sustainable Development Goals and make them available to prepare the next generation of sustainable development leaders and practitioners. So that's a very quick introduction to the Academy. This slide here is actually one of my favorites because it gives you a little snapshot of almost everything that we teach. And I won't go into it in detail except to say that what you see here is a reflection of the breadth of issues that Agenda 2030 covers and that the Sustainable Development Goals encapsulate. And for us, what's very important about this is not just the individual topics, but really the story that brings them together and how do each of the Sustainable Development Goals connect with the others, and how does one think about a systematic frame to really think about them in totality as opposed to as individual standalone topics. So our courses are typically offered as online courses. They're of different lengths. We also put our material forward for teachers to be able to use in their classrooms, and that's a little bit of, I think, what a lot of you who are involved in the online masters are seeing. I want to talk about Mission 4.7, which Paul mentioned briefly, which is one of our new initiatives. We launched it in December. It's essentially a campaign to bring together leaders from the world of politics, from business, from civil society and academia to advocate for the importance of what we're talking about today, that sustainable development is something that should be taught, that should be part and parcel of education systems around the world, as well as teaching about global citizenship to really make young people feel like they're part of a global community and that problems that affect different parts of the world are problems that should and do matter to them. What you see on the right here is an image from our launch in December where Pope Francis spoke and helped inaugurate Mission 4.7. This is a collaboration across many institutions. So STSN is the host with the SDG Academy leading this coalition, but we also have a very strong partnership with UNESCO and with the Ban Ki-moon Center for Global Citizens, as well as with Columbia University, with Sunway University. So these are really the core partners of Mission 4.7. And there are three things that this is trying to do. First, it's advocating, right? So the idea is to really get an influence and support governments in committing to making sustainable development part and parcel of what is taught in their countries. The second is to help build resources, so build the knowledge, really to put together how sustainable development can be taught at different levels of education. And so that's the second piece of Mission 4.7. And the third is a recognition that all of this costs resources. It's not just about money, but it is about putting together people with the expertise by bringing together people for consultation, by investing in teachers, to really build out a high quality program for sustainable development. So that's Mission 4.7. I hope many of you will join the mission moving forward. There's lots of exciting activities planned over the next year for that. But let me now come to the core of the question that Paul has put to us, which is how do we think about teaching sustainable development? And there are really two aspects to this. One is a little bit of what Paul mentioned, which is what we think about when we think about education, which is the formal system of education, and that runs all the way from kindergarten through grade 12, through undergrad, through postgrad. It's really your school, college, university infrastructure. And so one big question is, how does sustainable development get taught within the sector, and what needs to happen for it to be taught effectively? But there's also a second aspect to this, which is encapsulated very nicely in SDG 4, which is the Sustainable Development Goal on education, which is really about lifelong learning. Now, many of you who are studying and who are here joining us in the webinar today are in your 20s. You have about half a century of working life ahead of you if all goes well. we know that the education that you're receiving right now, that you're probably in the process of completing, will actually be almost certainly insufficient to equip you for a career of that length. Because of technological change, because of social change, because the world that we're living in is evolving so rapidly that you will need to reskill quite frequently. And so moving forward, our vision of learning is that it'll happen at different ages, it'll happen in different ways. And we have to think about a way where people are able to learn about sustainable development even when they're not part of a formal education system. So these are the two broad channels. Now, when we look at the formal education channel, we obviously have to think about the structures that guide and that govern formal education. So that would include sustainable development being part of a curricula. It would mean learning objectives. It would mean a semester system. It would mean specific formal courses. It would mean exams. So whatever we're thinking about in terms of content has to be able to fit into a structure of that nature. But then there's also, when you talk about lifelong learning, a different approach, which is much more informal, which is continuous, which is much more flexible. And this is really the definition of the online master's program that Sunway and UCD are running, which is really one of the most innovative new ways to teach sustainable development that exists in the world. And many of you who are students are doing this program along with your work and along with doing many other things. And so that actually is a recognition of the reality of today's young professionals, that they will want to learn about the issues that they're working on while also working, while being part of their communities, while being part of society. And so we have to balance out when we think about education for sustainable development across these two legs, the formal curriculum led process, as well as something that is much, much more flexible and controlled by the learner.
So
Again, when
Chandrika,
we, yeah,
a minute maybe.
a minute is fine. When we're talking about the formal sector, we're also talking about integration with other subjects. So, really, how do we think about teaching math and teaching science and teaching social science while teaching sustainable development so that it's not seen as a standalone, but it really fits in? Whereas, in the context of informal learning, there are no formal structures. So, we really have to focus on the interdisciplinarity to really think about teaching, let's say, public health workers about why food matters and why they need to think about energy and how that fits into public health goals. So there's a slightly different focus on this. And finally, when we're talking about the formal sector of learning, we know that the best kind of learning happens when students apply what they've learned and are able to do practical projects within their communities. Whereas when we talk about informal learning, people are already working. So really there the aim is to help them go from the global problems to how it actually affects them in their countries and in their communities. And from our perspective, the way we can do that is using technology as a base for scale. That's what the Academy does, but that's also what we see as being the fastest and the best way to get to a very large number of people. We at the Academy reach about 800,000 people around the world. But we also need an offline component where people can meet face to face, discuss, learn from each other. And so that's the combination that we believe will deliver education for sustainable development. I'm going to leave you with a slide of all the various ways on how to reach us, but look forward very much to the discussion and to comments from everybody else in the panel. Thank you so much.
Okay, so that's perfect. And I will share that with everyone on email if that's okay afterwards. So now we're going to turn to Lanice Collins from the UN Academic Impact. So you have the floor, Lanice.
Hi, everyone, and greetings to you around the world, whatever time zone you're in. My name is Lanice Collins, and I work with UN Academic Impact, which is an initiative that was started 10 years ago by then Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, because at the time the UN did not have an office that was devoted to working with universities, colleges, institutions of higher education to really sort of access the research and innovation that happens on campuses. As Paul mentioned when he started speaking, universities are really at that nexus of civil society education, but also the creating inputs into policies for governments, advising private sector businesses, really driving innovation and research and technology that goes into all sectors of society. And so we really weren't reaching out to that group of stakeholders to really take advantage and to plug in with what they were doing. And so UNAI was born to work on that. And also to advance this idea, as Chandrika pointed out, of global citizenship. How do you reach students? How do you sort of inculcate the values and missions, founded in the UN Charter, and that are important to the organization, so that you are creating generations of leaders who are going out into the world and who are going out with this mindset that they can make a difference both locally and globally. So that's what we work to do at UNAI through a number of partnerships, a number of initiatives, creating connections, putting schools in touch with each other, putting schools that are doing innovative research, which are, thousands of schools, in touch with UN offices that can benefit from their research, but also really trying to reach students and young people to stress to them that it's what you learn in your classrooms, it's what you do on your campuses, it's what you do in your communities, and it's what you go on to do in your careers that can really move the needle on some of these global challenges that we're trying to solve. So, for example, we do work with educators to try to streamline the SDGs and knowledge on sustainability into curricula. But we also try to encourage students that there are things that they can do on their campus. So you can start literally with your campus. And if you identify an issue that maybe there is water waste or food waste happening on your campus, or that, some buildings can be turned into green buildings, there are things that you can start with right where you are to identify to make your campus greener. There are also, millions of students who are doing activities in their communities, taking those global issues and bringing them to the local level. And Paul mentioned the Millennium Campus Network and the Millennium Fellowship programs, and that's exactly what that program does. It looks at young people who've already started doing things in their communities, and then works with them to scale up their impact through leadership training, through sort of skills and technology access, so that they can have an even bigger impact, and connecting them with each other. So if you're working on a water related issue in a country in Latin America, maybe you can partner with a country in Africa or Asia Pacific and share ideas and innovation and sort of cross-populate those ideas. So really trying to empower young people in their communities and to empower them to help them scale up the work that they're already doing. And more importantly, it's really critical that students understand that the SDGs are cross-cutting and they apply to every walk of life. So it does not matter what you're studying. It absolutely does not matter. You can mainstream the SDGs into your work. A lot of times people think, well, I'm not studying environmental sustainability. I'm a business major. I'm an engineer. But every single SDG and every area of work, if you go into banking, if you go into finance, if you go into engineering, into healthcare, into food security, maritime, activities, or law, all of these careers, you can have a sustainable mindset and you can mainstream that into the work that you do. So whether it's how do we finance for development, how do we evaluate the investments that we're making using sustainability metrics, all of these things, you can find a way to mainstream sustainability and the SDGs in your career paths. And so it's really important for us to reach students in their education, and as Chandrika said, through the pipeline, formal education, informal education, K through 12, graduate, postgraduate, to understand that every choice that you make every day, from the time you get up until you go to bed, in your career, every day that once you finish your studies and you go into work and you go into an office or work remotely, that there are choices that you can make and questions that you can ask to help people start thinking about how is the work we're doing going to impact our community? How is the work that we're doing going to impact the world? And how is it going to help advance sustainability, justice, equality, human rights, gender rights, women's rights? And is our work helping to advance that? Or, is it maybe not helping to advance that? And what can we do to change it? So it's about having that mindset so that when you leave your classroom and you've, completed your education, that you continue to apply that knowledge to your work and in your careers, through the life of your career. As Chandrika said, many of you are in your 20s, so you have, God willing, a half century of work ahead of you. So this is where we can make real change. This is where we can move the needle. This is where we can achieve the 2030 agenda. And it's through you and through your education and through how you apply that throughout your life, in your career and in your community. So I will leave it at that. I know Paul said that he will share some resources. So very happy to, share social media content, check out our website, but just want to leave you with an idea that it's a lifelong application of creating and moving sustainability forward.
That's excellent. That's a real call for action. Thank you very much. And now to my favorite professor, Wing Wu, fellow economist. You have the floor.
Thank you. Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. I am the lucky individual who is heading the Jeffrey Sachs Center for Sustainable Development at Sunway University. Sunway University was established by the Sunway Corporation, but it is not the university around 10 years ago was taken out from Sunway Corporation and handed over to a charity foundation, so that the university would be supported by charitable contributions and by endowment funds, and not be put under the pressure of profit maximization. This particular movement of Sunway University out of Sunway Corporation reflects the instinctive nature of Jeffrey Chia's adherence to sustainable development. Jeffrey Chia grew up in a mining town in Malaysia, where the most common, his idea of what the neighborhood looks like is like a moonscape. Basically, you have got abandoned mining holes where the soil is completely leached of not only of minerals but of nutrients, where not even earthworms can survive. So in reaction to that, he was given the right to an abandoned tin mine, and what he has done is he has turned that into an exhibition, an example, a prototype of sustainable development. What has happened is this abandoned tin mine today is a thriving tree-covered city, which in order to discourage the use of private automobiles. The city has a network of overhead walkways that are covered by solar panels. This practice, this desire to show by example the importance of sustainable urban development was gradually realized that showing an example is not good enough, because if you look at public policies pursued in many countries, including in Malaysia, you find that environment is not a hot political mobilizing idea, a principle. So we realized that, Jeffrey Chow realized that education is the key. We have to invest in the future generations so that they know about the importance of sustainable development. This is why the Jeffrey Sachs Center was established in 2016 in partnership with the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network. The one way you can see that most of Southeast Asia does not yet understand the importance of sustainable development can be seen in the attitude that Southeast Asia has towards the current drive for heightened climate actions in the developed countries of the world. In 2019, the European Union, as we know, adopted the European Green Deal. The Chinese in October 2050 declared that it would be carbon neutral by 2060. And this started a race. Japan declared 3 weeks later that it would be carbon neutral by 2050. And Korea followed a few days later by saying it too would be carbon neutral by 2050. So in these countries, what we see is there is a race towards zero, a race for carbon neutrality. But what is the attitude in Southeast Asia? The attitude in Southeast Asia is not race to zero, but brace for zero. Brace for zero. Because there's the misperception that protection of the environment will mean a slowing down of economic development. Let me take a simple example about the nature of the confusion. For example, in my own role as an advisor to the Sunway Corporation, in internal discussion, we decided Sunway Corporation will go carbon free by 2050. And so we look at what determines the size of our carbon footprint. And we found that over 60% of the carbon footprint comes from the energy that we buy from the local electricity company. That largely because the electricity is generated by coal-powered plants. So many of the people in my committee have said, well, Sunway must have its own solar farm, have its own wind farm. The fact that all our walkways are covered by solar panels is not enough. We should buy up the neighborhood and put up solar panels and windmills. But I said, this is not the right approach. What they have shown that it is technically feasible to achieve zero carbon emissions. But what they have also proved is this is not economically optimal. In other words, it's not the cheapest way of achieving it. What do I mean by that? Because what we really ought to do, which is what Tan Sri Jeffrey Chow is doing, is he sits on the National Economic Council and he is pressing and persuading the government that the important thing is that all the electricity companies all the power suppliers should be supplying green energy to everybody, because the cost of converting the entire national energy system to green energy is cheaper than each firm installing its own solar panels and windmills. So in making that argument, he realized that education is the key, so that people understand the difference between technical feasibility of doing something and the and it must be compatible with economic optimality. So it means that the first principle in economics, we have to have a division of labor. 30 seconds. 30 seconds. What it means is, at the individual level, Sunway should pursue all measures whereby it minimizes its carbon footprint, but at the same time, as a citizen, it must press the government to set about institutions that are devoted to setting rules that make zero carbon the cheapest way possible to achieve, like getting the power system to be producing green energy. So that's why we are emphasizing education, and hence we are in a partnership with Paul for this master's program. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, the Jeffrey Shell story is an inspiring story and a good example of the role of universities in national policy. And it's a joy to be in partnership with Sunway and SDG Academy, no doubt. So just conscious of time now, Chandrika, you wanted to whip around on questions, but I was actually thinking of moving on to the students. They prepared their statements. So, but if you want to ask questions to the I'm calling them the adults, but what I don't really want to say is the older adults, actually, rather. So if the young adults want to ask the older adults questions, get into the chat there. But I'm actually going to move down the list. So I'm going to start with high school or secondary school, and then move on, if that's okay, Maeve, to undergrad, and then we'll move up to we might let Michael in then, Michael, and from the Pathways Fellow, and then we move on to the Sunway and UCD master students. So I'll call on Patrick Walsh from Blackrock College in Ireland just to say a few words.
My name is Patrick Welch from Dublin, Ireland. I'm happy to share some reflections of my exposure to the sustainable development education. My primary education was in Blackrock, Dublin, though I did spend a year in St. Margaret's of Cantona, Riverdale, New York City. I'm currently in secondary school in Blackrock College in Dublin, undertaking a transition year, where I can undertake job and volunteer placements, such as attending the UN Youth Forum 2021. Catholic schools are very good at social teachings and engaging in ongoing charity work. My school strives to nurture a strong sense of justice, a desire for a more caring and compassionate society, a dependence of mind, respect for schools to the community, active fundraising for St. Vincent de Paul and other charities. Increasingly, the importance of caring for our planet is beginning to be incorporated into Catholic schools. Many initiatives have been taken, green schools committees, designed environmental weeks, a focus on recycling, walking, or cycling to school. During my transition year, I had a placement at Huawei in Dublin to learn about the future of 5G, cloud computing, and AI, and their applications. I learned a lot, and I realized that technology has the power to do a lot of social and environmental good. I feel the SDG education must be mainstreamed into STEM education if we are going to achieve the SDGs. Whatever my education and career path I take, I will go and ask questions to work along to the SDGs as I go along. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much for that intervention. So the role of STEM highlighted again. So now I'd invite Maeve from University College Dublin undergraduate.
Hi everyone, my name is Maeve de Courcy MacDonald and I am here on behalf of a group of students who are taking the UCD Sustainable Development Goals module as an elective in University College Dublin. So this module is an elective module open to all early years undergraduates in UCD. We chose the course due to an interest in the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So our group is made up of 4 students, myself and Ellen McKenna, who are both second year law students, Rosie McLaughlin, who is studying history and politics, and Rachel McAreevy, who is a veterinary nursing student. It has been really interesting to take this module alongside these students and evaluate how we have interacted with the goals throughout our lives, as the multidisciplinary nature of our courses mean that we all bring different focuses and approaches to learning about the SDGs. However, we still have noted that we do have a number of shared experiences with regards to the SDGs. Our earliest exposure to these issues occurred at primary school. So even though the SDGs hadn't been established at this stage, and the Millennium Development Goals were in force at the time, and we still were able to engage with core issues of the goals through programs such as the Green Schools Initiative. And the Green Schools Initiative is Ireland's leading environmental education programme for schools, with themes such as litter and waste, energy, water, travel, biodiversity, and global citizenship. This was our first encounter with serious issues that would be included as part of the SDGs. As we progressed through second level education, the goals made up no part of our core curriculum and engagement was very much optional. Having made that point, I do think it is important to note that we still managed to further our knowledge of the SDGs, as there were competitions and events that we participated in that very clearly brought the issues that they tackle into focus. So one event that stands out to me was a Women in Politics conference that I took part in, which obviously links very closely to Sustainable Development Goal 5 of gender equality. I was lucky enough to attend a school that did emphasise the importance of the goals. So my school ran a development education class for students who took part in our optional transition year. I completed this class in 2016, by which stage the SDGs were well established and formed the basis for our classwork and our discussions. I would definitely say that my personal secondary school experience taught me a lot about the goals. However, a lot of this learning came from events that either myself as an individual or my school as a single entity consciously made the decision to engage in rather than coming from our education system as a whole. Our third level courses have caused our learning about the goals to become more focused on our chosen area of study. For example, I have studied the goals in the context of legal modules, such as environmental law and policy. So for myself and Ellen, who will be working in the legal field, we can see how much more relevance is being ascribed to achieving the goals already. So most corporate law firms now have practice areas that directly relate to SDGs, with key practice areas for law firms now including energy, infrastructure, and natural resources, or environmental and planning law. It is becoming increasingly possible to link your work as a lawyer to achieving the SDGs, and equally, it is important to have a good knowledge of the SDGs to do your work in different legal fields. As I have already mentioned, my group member Rachel is studying veterinary nursing, and she has found that the goals impact her studies in a different way. So veterinary nursing students are taught to incorporate the concept of One Health in their studies and in practice, which is basically the idea that the health of our animals and our earth has a direct impact on humans' health and survival. Rosie's studies in history and politics led her to undertake an internship last summer in the Irish Department of Environment and Climate Change, and there she was able to see firsthand how SDGs are integrated in society through new policies, but also the difficulties of doing this. So outside of our college courses, university has also given us the scope to explore the goals further. So the most obvious example here is the fact that we have all opted to take this Global Development Goals module. We are attending the UN Youth Forum as part of this elective, and we are also involved in a number of other activities concerning the goals, most notably by undertaking short courses with the SDG Academy and through our social media campaigns being run during UCD SDG Week, where we hope to interest a wider audience of students on our campus. Given the learning and enjoyment we have taken from our experiences with these goals, we believe that more could be done to incorporate them in a formal sense in school and college curriculums. This could be done more easily through primary and secondary school courses that have their content set by the Department of Education, but it might also be possible that all third level courses have an optional module that highlights how the goals link to that particular academic field. So that's our evaluation of our past, present, and future engagement with the SDGs. So I'll hand it back to Paul now.
Okay, thanks very much, Maeve, and the other co-authors of that. So that's excellent. So Very valuable points and contributions. So can I moving along to Michael OJ from the SDSN Local Pathways Fellow. The floor is yours, Michael.
Thank you. Good day, everybody. My name is Michael Oju. I'm from Nigeria, an architect by profession. Okay, I think it's really a privilege to speak to all of us here and then to spark our interest about the need to work for the Sustainable Development Goals. We as young people are significant dividends of today's global population, and as key agents of socio-economic and political movers of any society, we play a critical role in our nation's renaissance, particularly as it relates to the environment around us, to engender viral, attitudinal, and economic change. And looking at the myriads of social issues to tackle, challenges that are inherently transboundary, multi-generational, and multifaceted, such as terrorism, sustainable development, climate change, urbanization, etc. Our collective effort matters in these trying times of global emergency. And in view of this, the UN Sustainable Development Solution Network, being one of the world's leading training and research program for SDG 11 for young urban leaders, it seeks to provide knowledge and resources and means needed to enable young innovators like you and me to localize and implement the 2030 agenda in their respective communities. And this they do by guiding and informing their advocacy and outreach work, by providing them with a framework for engagement with local stakeholders, facilitating mutual learning and exchange of urban solutions. And then it also supports their efforts to promote local understanding, dialogue, and problem solving for sustainable development. I believe is a call for all of us, we that are young, to sign up today and make the world a better place for all humanity. And even as we leave no one behind. And let me just wrap up with this. I think we need to think globally and then act locally. I think that's one of the great things that will help us to achieve these global goals. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. And again, I will put information up about SDSN Local Pathways Fellowships. And you said you're an architect, right? That's what you base your work on, right?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Very good. So I'm going to call on Laura Lamb next from University College Dublin, and then I'll move on to Sunway after that.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to be joining you in this event today from wherever you are in the world. My name is Laura Ham, and as Paul mentioned, I'm part of the MSc in Sustainable Development at University College of Dublin. Before coming into this program, I grew up in the US a certain amount of years ago, in which I can say that in my primary and secondary education, there was, I don't think, anything that I can remember in terms of sustainable development that was incorporated into the curriculum. We may have touched on, things like biodiversity or gender equality, but it was, far from the main learning goals. And then from there, I went into study in the arts in Chicago. And again, I don't think that I had any, core issues of sustainability that were presented in my curriculum. Social issues were certainly, part of working in the humanities. And it wasn't until I started to travel abroad and kind of engage with that global citizenship idea in a personal way that sustainable development and the SDGs and what the issues that they focus on really became part of my awareness. So kind of after traveling and living abroad for quite a long time, I actually ended up founding an impact-driven travel company and have been doing that for the last few years before now entering this sustainable development program at UCD. And I'm, consider myself very lucky to be a part of this, kind of groundbreaking program this year. And the collaborations and partnerships with the SDG Academy and Sunway, and being able to engage online while working and, have guest lecturers from all over the world, I think has been a really incredible opportunity. But what I would love to see, is when I look at my nieces and nephews that are coming up through, the education system now, is the importance and significance of sustainable development as it links to maths and science and humanities being incorporated into that curriculum. And unfortunately, I don't know that it really is yet. Universities, I do think, have a pivotal role to play, because not only do they train, like Paul mentioned, all of the different industries and fields and people that go into every aspect of society, but they also have the ability to, pivot and engage quicker sometimes than, perhaps adjusting the entire science curriculum for US schools, for example. So yeah, I'm looking forward to, I feel like we're in this pivotal time where these things are becoming more at the forefront, and would just like to, see more ways that we can, double down on the linkages, and present sustainable development education as not just a niche idea, but something that is encompassing with every topic or field. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So now we're going to keep it going. So we do have a number of short speakers from Sunway University. So Subhatra, can you go first? And then we'll keep, and I know people have questions, we'll get to them after, but we'll hear from the master students in Sunway now.
Thank you, Mr. Paul. Good evening, good morning. And so I would like to start by saying that I did my degree in hospitality and tourism. And that's where I was able to learn about sustainable tourism and the impact tourism has on the environment, society, as well as a country's economy. And I recently graduated from Master in Sustainable Development. And during the duration of the course, we were exposed to many elements, for example, climate change and its impact to the coral reefs, which was something new to me. And I was also fortunate enough to assist my office with their sustainability related projects such as groundwater repurposing, rainwater harvesting, and food waste recycling. And Sunway Lagoon Sdn Bhd, which is a theme park. We are just venturing into sustainable initiatives, and we are looking forward to do much more in future. In terms of career prospects, I think there is an opportunity to pursue PhD in sustainability, and I hope we could contribute more to JSC and also the SDG Academy, like what Madam Chandrika was explaining just now. And looking back during my secondary education, there was not much emphasis given on careers related to sustainability or even SDE. But over time, I think we have started to realize that the importance of growth without compromising the environment, values, and beliefs, which I think we should instill among young generations. And looking at the resources some of the panelists have showed and shared with us today, I seriously believe that we are at the right path to achieve the goals. And yeah, pretty much that's it. Thank you so much. Back to you, Mr. Paul.
Thank you very much. That was excellent. And can I call on Steve again from Sunway University?
Hi, Paul, and fellow friends from all over the world. Greetings from, I guess, Malaysia. It's midnight now. It's actually 1 a.m. in the morning. So I'm going to begin by saying that I'm very fortunate to be one of the part of the pioneering batch of the Sunway University Master in Sustainable Development Management program. I think one of the biggest strengths in this program is that we have very experienced lecturers who are not only academic experts, but also people who are in the industry practitioners. I mean, we have people who consult with, say, water company, teaching us about water sustainability. We have people who deals with waste management. There are lecturers who came from a corporate governance background, etc. So I think this is one of the biggest strengths in this program. And I, being an elected member of parliament, benefited hugely from the 1 year course. I'm going to share 3 thoughts on the value of the SDG education that I received in Sunway. I'm sure if given more time, I can say a lot more. I'm a politician, by the way. So and perhaps I'll end with one example of how the SDG education empowers me in my day-to-day work. Um, uh, 3 thoughts on the value of this education that I received. Number one, I think it provided me a roadmap and also clear targets. I mean, I'm sure it applies to everyone, and I like some of the speakers who said that the 17 SDGs are very relevant, easily integrated into all sorts of fields that we are doing in whether in corporate sector, in government, or even NGO advocacy work, etc. So I think this is it is a very convenient blueprint for us to work on. Number 2, and I think this is especially very important in my country, Malaysia, where there is a lot of division among people of various races and religion. It provides, especially young people, a target to move beyond racial and religious rhetorics. And I think to a large extent, move beyond political ideologies and to focus on very real, immediate, as well as very practical problems of our society that we all face. You know, whether you are whatever race or religion you come from, or whatever political persuasion you're coming from. And finally, thirdly, I think it provides a universal framework which connects and unites people from different countries and every different segment of society to think about the problems that I mentioned, very real, immediate, and practical problem. And by bringing people, by bringing everyone's focus to work on similar issues, I think we are putting more hands and heads to these issues, to solve these issues. And I'm going to end with one example of how the exposure helped me in my work. Last year, at the beginning of the COVID-19 lockdown, around mid-March of 2020, I was appointed advisor to the state government of Penang, one of the states, I think the second largest economy in Malaysia, on communication and community empowerment vis-a-vis COVID-19. And because of my exposure, I'm able to craft a clearer agenda in terms of food security, on public health, on economic justice, on education. I'm just going to list a few examples. We have, we have given 40,000 boxes of 1 month worth of food supplies, about 2,000 to 3,000 laptops for online learning. We have issued 4 times of economic stimulus package, around 15% of our annual budget. And I think one key element is that because of that sort of thinking, SDG, we managed, or at least I managed to advise the state government to put in. We are the only state out of 13 states, and including, if you plus the federal government, we were the only state which provided monetary grants to NGOs and individuals working on anti-domestic violence advocacy work during the lockdown, which is a main issue, which is a big issue. I mean, which we see during this lockdown period. So I think this is the value, very practical, very, very pragmatic, very immediate, and it definitely helps in my work. Thank you.
Okay, so that's excellent. And if I had my time all over again, I think instead of trying to influence legislators, I would become the legislator. So you're quite right to run for office. And I think all the young people should consider that, whether they feel like they can run for office or not, they should with an SDG mandate. I think that is increasingly important, unfortunately. And finally, our last speaker, I think, is Afanti. Are you there? You have the floor.
Yep. Thank you, Paul. So hi everyone, my name is Fendi. So just like my 2 colleagues, I just graduated from Sunway University as Master in Sustainable Development Management. So my previous experience on the education of sustainable development came from my working experience as an environmental consultant. So I work on a lot of strategic planning and public policy at national and regional level, mainly on climate change and biodiversity conservation. But the postgraduate program I did has radically changed my perspective. It helps me think more in multidisciplinary and cost-cutting manner across all economic, environmental, and social dimensions of development. So in context of education in sustainable development, I believe the skills, the mindset, and ability to see things in bigger picture, linking dimensions of poverty, human rights, gender equality, climate change, and biodiversity with each other is extremely critical, in addition to just the technical knowledge of part of it. Because we know a lot of sustainable development issues are systemic problems that require systemic change and systemic solutions. So in terms of where I'm going next in my career, I mean, there's so much opportunity out there in both public and private sector right now in Malaysia, everyone talking about sustainability. But my focus in my lifelong learning has always been on building my skill set as a policymaker and strategic planner, and I shall utilize my knowledge that I get from Sunway for this next step. So I just want to share that I just became a researcher with the All Parliamentary Group on Sustainable Development Goals to localize the SDGs by working with local stakeholders on the ground, members of parliament, government agencies, local communities, NGOs. But it's been very difficult for me because I work on a lot of projects at national level, but seldom at grassroots level. But I took on this new challenge because I think it gives me the first-hand experience in understanding the complexity and difficulty of bringing sustainable development agenda to the ground by doing action research. Because in Malaysia and I think other countries as well, especially at national level, we talk a lot about sustainable development and we have all these big and nice policies, but there are huge challenges in implementing them. And they are really often detached from the reality on the ground. So hopefully I can, from this research I'm doing, the work I'm doing now, I can help to improve the evidence-based policy making across various disciplines and across all levels of national, state, and local. So it is part of my learning process for me to hopefully be a better policymaker and sustainable development advocate. Yeah, so thank you, Paul. Back to you.
Yeah, that's really excellent. So that's one thing we've learned from COVID is the importance of science policy and evidence. And we know with the European Parliament and even in Ireland, with our own Oireachtas, that there are opportunities for scientists to support parliamentarians. And I can tell you that is a very, very important thing to do at this point of time. So that's excellent that you're doing that. Is there somebody from Sunway that I've missed? I have a feeling I might have.
I think Puyi, if you are still on.
Go for it, Puyi.
Puyi, are you still on? Oh, I think midnight has struck.
Yeah, well, congrats to everyone from Southeast Asia for coming on the call at 1 o'clock in the morning, April 7th. So that's appreciated. So I tell you, is there any people with a few that want to ask just a very quick comment and questions, and then I might just play so that you meet Jeffrey Xia and you understand the masters more. I might just play a little video. But does anyone want to jump in very fast with a comment or something, like there's something that we've completely missed?
That's a quick question.
Yeah, go first.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, please introduce yourself, Andrew, and ask a quick question.
Yes, I'm Andrew. And I'm here. Feedback.
We can hear you.
Hello, thank you. I am Andrew Koko Wijila. I am a Liberian. I'm from Liberia, Africa, and I'm currently studying safety engineering here in China. My question has to do with I typed in the group. I'll just let it go a little bit further about your plan to see your idea about sustainable development. One of the speakers spoke and talked about application. We've heard and listened to a lot of principles and systems that have been set up, but the application is where the challenge is. Do you have an application of your knowledge that you think will assist our world today, a practical and effective application that will assist our world today to sell this idea of sustainable development? I don't know whether my question is clear.
Yeah, well, it's a great question. So very, very quickly, one of the critiques of the HLPF, and sometimes the discussions we're having now, is we talk about the problems and where we want to be without providing, as you say, solutions and applications. But the subcommittees to HLPF, particularly the Science Technology Innovation Forum, and there's a website called Connect 2030. There is a lot of examples there of STI, Science Technology Innovation, and the local Pathway Fellows have that. And Chandrika is going to tell me more. So go ahead, Chandrika.
And Andrew, thank you for that question. I want to just highlight a couple of things. The Sustainable Development Solutions Network focuses, there's a very important reason why the word solutions is in there, right? Because the idea is to think about practical ways of making sustainable development happen. We host every year two initiatives that I think would be interesting for you to look at. One is the Global Solutions Forum, which we host every September, where our networks, so we are a network of universities and we have about 1,400 universities in the STSN. Our networks basically showcase the very practical work that they are doing to solve problems of sustainable development. And so if you just search for Global Solutions Forum, what you will see is essentially a compendium of examples from around the world of how science and evidence and research is being used to generate solutions on the ground. The other initiative is led by our wonderful youth group, STSN Youth, which is the Youth Solutions Report. And it's almost a competition. I don't want to exactly call it a competition, but it essentially is a call for young people to showcase again and present the work that they're doing to solve problems of sustainable development. And our youth group essentially compiles some of those best examples into a report that is also released on an annual basis. So, very much hard-coded into our DNA and into the work that we do is the idea of practicality and of making change happen on the ground. So I hope these resources, my colleague Shannon has typed them into the chat function. So if you look at the chat box, you'll be able to get the links to both of these initiatives.
Yeah, and just to say that in the MSCs in Sustainable Development, we do have a project component where you have to actually produce a solution. Like there is a project that you do within the Masters, which is exactly with that focus. Another question? Any other questions? Okay, so last, are all the speakers okay? So we're just about, so what I'm going to do is play us out. So you meet Jeffrey Shia, and you get a little bit of a promo of the masters that we teach as well. So let me know that you hear this, obviously.
At a very young age, I became convinced that education offers the best route out of the poverty cycle and misery. And I was determined to make quality education affordable and accessible to as many young people as possible.
Knowledge is not virtue. We can create knowledge, but we can use it to make nuclear bombs, or we can actually use it to cure COVID-19.
The potential of online learning is vast. We can connect classrooms around the globe. We can have world-scale projects by students. We can bring the world's leading specialists in topics to your classroom in a way which would not be possible other than with online education.
We're very excited about the collaboration that we've just entered into with University College Dublin and with Sunway University for this master's program. This is a unique collaboration because it brings together great academic institutions with a platform like the SDG Academy that curates content on the Sustainable Development Goals.
We can transform society. By providing quality education, we can equip students with the knowledge and values that are needed to build a better world. The Master's program is an example of this mission.
So as you're making up your mind about what the rest of your life looks like, think about a career in sustainable development and take the first step by signing up for this master's program. A, it's a wonderful program. B, you can access it from where you are. And C, it's much less expensive than the normal programs that would offer this kind of quality. It is something that is available to you now because of the times we live in, because of the unique collaborations that have brought it together. And it is the best way to change the world that you live in.
Okay, so I'm going to call an end to the meeting, but I am going to stay on, and I know there's a few people want to ask questions, and I'm happy to take them. And I will do a report of this meeting, and I'll send it on to everyone. And so everything in the chat, you will see all the resources, and anything you want to say now, I'll put in the resources. So I'm going to stop recording.